Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome to Rockin the Love. I'm Robyn.
And I'm Gil, and we're happy to have you here with us today. It is a Wednesday, and we are going to talk to you about what's the official title?
Again.
Again.
Blink. And it's July.
And it's July. Blink and it's July. Wow. Okay. I think that's a great place to start.
Clearly, and that's where we're at, is the beginning. So, blink and it's July. Can you believe it's July? Time has gone so fast. It's the middle of the year.
The middle of 2026. We were just at the beginning of 2026. And here we are.
Here we are. So welcome. Let us know you're out there. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We are in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where it is hot. It is hot.
It is hot.
Not to be confused with feeling hot. It's very different. Brings a whole new meaning to that. But today we're going to explore time. That's where the title Blink and It's July comes from. We're going to explore what it means, what time means, because today we're talking about something that almost everybody feels or has expressed, that time is speeding up, and where does time go, and all of those things. And not that hasn't been talked about for ages, but it hasn't been talked about in the context of all the things we have and we do now. So we're just going to take a minute and talk about that and how that fits into our lives and what we can do to perhaps bring some pause to it, slow it down, or just see what comes up.
It might be affecting our relationships as well. You know, it's just because there's a sense that there's not enough time to do anything. Oftentimes, with the sense of it being speeding past us, it's like, oh, the day's gone, the thing's done. So anyway, figuring out how to work with that a little bit.
That's what we're doing. But before we do that, we're going to slow down and find out, how was your week, Mr. Olmsted?
My week was all right. I don't really have any big thing to announce or talk about, except that there was a lot. There's a lot happening and information coming in that challenged me, and opportunities showing up that were wonderful, and all that stuff at the same time. You know, it's the illusion, you know, this is another piece of the whole thing. The illusion that time in our life is linear is kind of weird too, because it's not quite accurate. You know, we have pieces happening all the time. So, with that, I would say my week was good, and I'm happy to be here. What about yours?
My week was great. Hi, Shay. Good to see you here. My week was great. It feels like it was productive. It feels like things are moving, and I feel like I have some clarity and order happening in my life.
Ooh, nice.
In spite of you.
Nice.
All right. Okay, so that's it. That's a very short update, but that's it. And it's good because I want to get to our topic. So before we do that, where are we going?
We're going to the good news, folks. It's time for the good news. And I have something to share with you today, which I think you will find quite humorous. So, time, energy, effort is expended in so many places. And by gosh, if certain states and local districts have determined that charging kids to have a lemonade stand was a valid use of said time, and trying to fine them for not complying with certain laws, et cetera, et cetera. Well, somebody with a stable mental state managed to come up with the concept that, we could exempt those types of things from regulation, and so they wrote up something that exempts it, that, says you can have on your own private property and make up to so much money, and as long as you're not serving temperature dependent beverages and, all this kind of stuff, the health parameters, which basically, set up the idea that, and part of the reasoning behind it was because kids need to learn how to be entrepreneurial and figure things out, not just be told what they can't do.
That's great.
So this has happened particularly in Michigan, and there's a few other states that are sort of made sure that it's the same thing. And I just find what really I find interesting is, who are these regulators that were out there finding kids or looking at trying to, I don't know, what were they thinking? Are they that tied to the rules? Maybe that's it. Maybe they're very, very precise rule following people, and maybe that's what makes them such good inspectors. I don't know, but it's hard for me to quite comprehend. So anyway, good news. Sometimes we do silly stuff in our society, and sometimes we make a move to correct it. So there you go.
All right. Well, my story caught my eye because my other show, Girls Behaving Metaphysically, my partner on that show is living in Brisbane, Australia, and this took place there. And this is a story about a guy was riding his motorcycle to work when the driver crossed over and into oncoming lane and smashed the car in front of him. And the impact dragged him under the vehicle as it surged backwards. And he couldn't breathe, and the compression on his chest was so intense that his heart wasn't able to beat properly. And two guys who were working nearby heard the crash, ran out, and they saw a pair of legs sticking out from under the car. They called their colleagues. They tried to lift the 3,300 pound car off of him, and the first attempt didn't work. The second attempt succeeded only in breaking more of his ribs, but the group refused to stop, and they just grabbed the car and lifted it with all of their might off of him, and the car came up just enough to pull him out from under it. And he was still conscious. He thought he was going to die. His lung was punctured. He was grasping for air. All of those things. Paramedics urged him to stay, calm, and stayed with him. And they took him to the hospital and stabilized his lungs. And he had a slow, steady recovery. And he just called. Afterwards, he was able to meet with them and, of course, thank them, and just called them certified legends through his tears and all of the emotion. And he was just so grateful that he gets to spend more times with his family and his daughters, and just a second lease on life, and couldn't say thank you enough. And those are just the times when you go, wow. Like when people do beyond what they think they can do. So, and it changes lives and saves lives. That's my story.
Imagine the difference in The Wizard of Oz if somebody had come and lifted the house off the Wicked Witch. Wouldn't that have been a whole different result?
It would have been. It would have been. And
they saw those pair of legs there, and they said, "Yes, we will lift the house."
Yeah, and I'm going to quote our producer, even though it's out of context. I have to live with him, folks. All right. So when we come back, we are going to be talking about Blink, and it's July. and just how fast time is going, and what happens when we can slow down enough to actually feel our lives, and how does time shape our relationships, and all of those good things. So let's explore it together when we come back right here on New Thought Media Network.
Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Center for Spiritual Living United Life, Sunshine Cathedral, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Universal Joy Center, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. On behalf of New Thought Media Network, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, come be you.
The Heal Your Life Workshop Facilitator and Life Coach Certification Training, approved personally by Louise Hay, is coming to San Diego, facilitated by expert trainers Christy Dixon and Anna Milkick. This 3.5-month training includes multiple sessions on Zoom and 9 days in beautiful San Diego. It will change your life and enable you to help others transform their lives.
Hello and welcome back to Rockin the Love. I'm Robyn.
And I'm Gil, and we are your hosts for this incredible journey to the blink of an eye. We're talking about Blink, and it's July. Yep. What is that about?
It happened fast, and the challenge with that is that blink and it'll be December, because that's what happens. It's like all of a sudden it happens like that. But our topic today is really about, across cultures and ages, and people everywhere are talking about how life feels like it's moving faster as they get older. And so we're going to discuss that and talk about, is time really speeding up, or is it our perception, and the whys and what we can do about that? So, is time really speeding up?
Is time really speeding up? Well, interestingly enough, the Earth's rotation may be speeding up, which could actually cause us to have to shave off a second from our year. So there's that. But apparently that has alternated from year to year and century to century and day to day forever. So the Earth is not absolutely consistent with our atomic clock measurements. But the trend has been actually for it to slow down. But now it's starting to speed up again. So that's an interesting piece. So there may be some fluctuation in this sense of time around us, whether we notice it or not. That's that part.
Yeah, and I would say that, I mean, so what in my findings, I haven't found that, even though I thought I heard that. I mean, I found what you said, but I haven't heard, I mean, I haven't found the scientific evidence that time is speeding up.
Time is speeding up, just that the Earth's rotation is changing.
Correct.
Which is linked to our perception of time.
However, that the feeling that time is speeding up is real, not the physics.
There's a psychological and a
neurological
the thing about getting older is that clearly every day becomes a smaller portion of our lives by percentage. So every single day that we live, that day is less a percentage than the day before was, relative to how long we've lived. So it feels like it goes faster because it's this little portion. When we were a kid waiting for Christmas,
right?
It was like, oh my God. And 6 months was 10% of our life.
Right. Right.
That was huge. And that shift. So there's that thing that happens, and that's a very real feeling and a real thing that goes on in us. So that's one thing that happens.
That's one thing, as well as like you said, as we age, I mean, there's all kinds of things. Well, you basically said it.
Yeah, I said it.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing, and what's more interesting to me, is some of these other things that are being pointed out these days. What did you find in other things that are being pointed out? Okay, I can talk about them.
I'm still processing. I'm still back on, when you were a kid, summer felt endless, and now it's July, and suddenly it's Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm still back there. So go ahead and say whatever you're thinking about.
Well, one of the things that I thought was really telling is this comment about the fact that we don't have division, we don't have compartmentalization in our days or our weeks. There was a time that you knew when you got up and you had breakfast, and then you went to work or did what you were doing, and then you were done and you had dinner, and you had time with people, and you had a weekend, and you went camping or you went hiking or you planned to build a fence, but you didn't have any other interruptions.
Right.
And now work doesn't end because we can always find it on our phone. There's always somebody texting, sending an email, something. And the rest of the time, we can then expand that into us having to process all that's going on in the world. Because the same thing happened, you could get a newspaper in the morning, perhaps, and learn about stuff going on. But that was the time when you did that. That was the space. And maybe you'd listen to the radio. But now, every 5 seconds, you can pick up your phone. You can be on your phone trying to send somebody a text and get a notification of some major event in the world that now you got to process that. And so there's no time to process. And I think that was the really fascinating part about that to me.
There's no time to process in there, you can't integrate, but you also you just can't even keep up. Forget process.
Well, yes, but that's part of it, is that because there's no time to sit with anything, and because it's not compartmentalized, it's like, whew, and of course this all goes to the fact that the amount of information that we receive on a daily or weekly basis is multiple, exponentially larger than what our predecessors did. You know, I mean, they were processing the same amount of information we do in a day in over the time period of a year, perhaps, or at least several months, and we get it all boom that fast.
Right. And so how does that affect our relationships? I mean,
Oh, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think off the top of my head it affects it because we don't have time for them in a certain way.
we don't have time to have a relationship in the same way, right?
Right.
And so when life feels fast, then connection feels thinner. You know, it can't be as in depth because you can't be invested in the same way, right? On some level.
Yes, you can't. Because there's not delineation, for instance, there's not a specific time. There isn't that time in any of our relationships where we are sitting down for coffee and not thinking about other things necessarily. That we are knowing that, well, we'll chat at dinner.
Where we take a break.
You know, where there's
A real
yeah,
break. Yeah. I want to share Shay's. Shay says, yes, I was just thinking this before the show came on, how I don't feel very good sometimes when I'm scrolling, and I was saying, please don't do that. I don't need all that information in my brain.
Yep. And that's exactly it. Our brains can't process it.
Well, there's no boundaries. Like we start doing one thing, you know, if we were going to look at our email or if we're going whatever, and by you know, or I'll go on the computer to do something, and I'll check my email, and by the time I've been there 40 minutes, I'm like, wait, what did I come to do? Because
Right.
it's so many things have happened since then.
Well, and that's an interesting thing is because of that, and that's that lack of segmentation, which allows for the rest period. We're also stressed all the time because we're on high alert. Because there's
Right.
always something new to see, to understand, to figure out. There's new information about what's going on at work, what project needs to be worked on, who we're supposed to be talking to and meeting with next. You know, there's just all these, and that's mixed in with who's bombing where and who's now involved in what scandal. I mean, all of these things are going on, and we're getting information on all of them throughout the same time period.
Well, I think, you know, my question was, how does it affect our relationships? But I think, like, when you're saying that, I'm thinking, how does it also affect our relationship with ourselves, right? How does it affect our self-love? Like when we're rushing and we stop tending to ourselves, we stop taking care of, you know, like we take, you know, there's a designated 10-minute break, and what do we do in it? You know, generally we try to catch up on something that we didn't do when we were, you know what I mean?
Right.
We don't take the break, like, to really, you know, refresh or go get water or do whatever breaks used to do.
Well, and we know from various experiments and things that have been done, for instance, that if you take people and you take them from a 5-day, 8-hour day work week to a 4-day, 8-hour day work week, you lose almost no productivity.
Right.
Why? Because they have that extra rejuvenation time. You know, by having an extra day off, having 3 days to recuperate, if you will, from their work week and be renewed and refreshed and do other things and all this kind of stuff. And while that is really good, at the same time, you know, and maybe it's more of a US phenomenon, but, you know, a lot of people don't even really have defined weekends or days off.
Right.
You know, because everything just sort of is molded together. And it's like, oh, I have time on this day to do that. Why do I have time on that day? Because I'm not supposed to be working. That's why I have time on that day. You know, I should be taking some space. But, you know, this has to be done and so can't. And, you know, and we adjust our lives to fit, in part because there's always things happening, you know.
Yeah, and I think even more so in, you know, talking to an audience full of spiritual beings, you know, and some of you, you know, working or being part of a center or a church or things like that, or as a practitioner or a minister, those boundaries get really blurred unless you have a strong sense of, no, not right now, 9 to 5 or whatever it is, you know, because your calling says you're available. And is that true? I mean, I don't know that that's true. You know, we know plenty of people that have stronger boundaries around those kind of things.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
and I think it's like just talking about that. I mean, I'm going to switch the subject a little. So if you want to say something about this, go ahead.
No, well, all I was thinking was, you know, I wonder about perhaps any of those with stronger boundaries, you know, are clear about time and time off. How have they found that to affect their sense of time, etc.? That was my thought.
Yeah, that would be great to know.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about, you know, all the things we do, and we being Gil and I, and how at the end of the day, long day, Gil can turn to me and say, I didn't get anything done. And I think that that's part of that time thing, because you get a lot of things done, but because there's not that delineation, because we don't delineate and hone in anymore, it's not like you can celebrate or accomplish those wins in those bite-sized chunks.
Well, yeah.
And there's always more.
Yeah, I mean, even the word bite size, I think, you know, it's like I had a spoonful of pudding and I did this and this, and I had another spoonful of pudding, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, I finished the pudding, but I didn't even notice I ate it. I mean, I don't feel like I did it because you know, it never satisfied me. And that's kind of the same thing. You know, we never feel complete because it's just a piece here and a piece there and a piece there, because between that all these other things are happening. You know, you go to sit down at your computer thinking, oh, I'm gonna eat my pudding and watch a video, and pretty soon you're in your email and then you're learning about this thing that's happening in the world, and you know, it's like boom. I don't know why I'm talking about pudding. I mean, we never eat pudding. Thought it was a good concept.
Because the proof is in the pudding.
That's what it is.
Mindfulness, says Shay. Yes. Mindfulness. Yes. Mindfulness. I mean, that I think, yes. How do we slow down time? And I think that's part of the answer to that question. I think mindfulness and practices, but and, you know, it just, if it feels like it's a much more, it feels like work. It feels like I have to work to slow down time, to be conscious and be fully present in the moment and fully create those boundaries and, you know, be conscious of doing things that matter emotionally. And, you know, and then even, I think also when you talked a little bit about how, you know, when we're kids, everything is novel and everything is new and everything is exciting. And so of course it feels, you know, time goes fast, but not in a different way. It also goes slow because then we have to wait, you know, just like if we have a weekend trip planned or something to somewhere that we haven't been. It's exciting. We're looking forward to it, you know. And so I think it's being conscious, having mindfulness, and being conscious of creating those, you know, novel experiences, or, you know,
Right.
doing things that matter emotionally.
Well, in part, we get in a routine. We get into routines, and days start to look the same, and the week looks the same, and all of that. Like, I can't tell you what I did this week, really. You know, when we review our week, it's harder for me now, especially since you're here and we're both together. I don't delineate it in the same way.
Mm. Yeah, I get that.
And but we have to. It's part of the way for us to allow ourselves to become more present is to break up the routine, to do things that are new and different, to go somewhere we haven't gone, to spend time somewhere else. These kinds of things that allow our brain to go, oh, this is different. Now I'm going to sharpen up and pay attention. You know, because I haven't needed to pay attention because I know what it looks like normally. I can just run, you know, we talk about running on autopilot. But,
Right.
you know, it's pretty much what happens. The other thing I thought was interesting that I heard discussed in this idea of time speeding up is about, you know, we always talk about the idea that, you know, we have to be in this now moment. And that with the way things are, there's this, because there's so many things happening, there's this sense that we are always on the cusp of the next moment, like they're overlapping. This moment isn't complete before the next moment is started. There's not any.
But time is linear.
Right, but time is linear. Yeah.
Just saying.
Right.
But I mean, I think that's a good question, because it's like, if we're living our life like it's linear, you know, then are we just going over everything and not experiencing it on some level?
Yeah, we're just plowing through it. And the interesting thing too is in what you were talking about a minute ago about, you know, the lack of novelty, the idea of new things. That is part of what happens in older people in their memories, because, you know, we always hear the thing, I remember what I did 40 years ago, but I don't remember what I did yesterday, you know. Well, part of that's because without the novelty, there's not a deep embodying of whatever the memory is that may have happened, you know. I drove down the street, I turned left, you know. Okay, I do that all the time, you know. It's nothing there. When I drove down the street and turned the corner and there was a big car accident, maybe I have a memory there if I pay attention to it. But maybe not, because I just go, oh, it's another slowdown on the road, and I go around and keep going, you know. But we get, because the less things are novel to us, the less of them register in our brain as something worthy of laying down some memory tracks, if you will, you know.
Yeah, I think that, yes, I think novelty, it slows time down, whereas, you know, routine and falling into that, you know, routine compresses it, you know, and it doesn't expand from there. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Anna Cherchez, she says, reminds me of Ferris. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
And that's exactly the thing, you know. And I think that stop and look around was a more natural process for more people when we had delineated time frames and delineated things that we did. we would stay in that moment with whatever it was. If we were sitting down to read the book, if we were sitting down to do this, we were focused on that in that moment. And so
The other thing is, we didn't have so many ways to do it. So if we were gonna plan a vacation, we went to a travel agency, or we went to the library and looked at books to look at Bali and see, or I mean, we click and click and click and click, and we get inundated with so much information.
well, sometimes, we do it to ourselves in the sense that now we can click and look at vacation anytime, but it's in the middle of when other stuff's happening, and then we get a thing about work, or we get a so instead of going to the library, like you said, and researching, we don't want to go to Bali or Costa Rica or whatever. I mean, we just go click, 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 give me a review, and we read somebody's review, and then we look, pretty soon we're looking at like, well, how much does it cost to buy food there, and all these other things.
Well, and just thinking about that concept, that means really we can decide to go on vacation and go to look for it, and we could decide not to go on vacation all within 10 minutes because we find out it's too expensive, or it's not going to work, or the flights aren't going to match up. It's like there's not a process of integration. So if our hopes could be up here, and then they could be down here, like over
within 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not, so you don't even get time to like live into the dream, build the dream, figure out what, how to do it differently. Any of those things, you're not even really invested in it before it's over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Shay says, physical pain keeps me pretty grounded and aware of everything going on in my life. I'm very present. Sobriety too.
Well, physical pain will do that. And at the same time, I found physical pain not to ground me in anything, but just to make me tired. I mean, I spend my time pushing it aside. So I'm not really grounded because I'm not really experiencing what's going on in the moment. I'm just trying not to experience what's going on in the moment. So I think that affects different people different ways. But that is an interesting concept for sure. It certainly has an effect on us, I'll guarantee that. No matter who you are, the physical pain is going to alter your experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is it physical pain we've brought onto ourselves to remind us of something we need to deal with? Or is it just, I tripped and twisted my ankles pain, because I think there's a lot of pain which kind of follows what you say. It keeps you grounded. You have to really be with to allow yourself to figure out where it's coming from. Why is this here? What's it telling me? What's it teaching me? And that's about being in the moment with whatever's going on in our bodies, in our relationships, in our stuff. So I think there's this tension between in the moment and somehow feeling like we're showing up for everything we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I think there's this thing of like, so science says that time isn't speeding up, but our awareness is slowing down, and our routines all of the routines and all of the things coming into our world are kind of just collapsing the feeling of time, right?
Mm.
And so I think it's really interesting because, so where do we go? How do we reclaim, uh,
How to reclaim our time, if you will.
yeah, and I think that means like reclaiming our presence, our meaning, our connection, and like having it be intentional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think for me, I think what I am hearing here is um, putting into motion some more delineation in my life, so that I can say this is what I'm doing here, and I'm not doing other stuff. I'm spending the day doing whatever, but that's what I'm doing. I'm not doing other stuff. I'm not trying to find out other things. I'm just doing that. Um, and I mean, that seems like one way to look at it. And I think another way is to just notice when we're allowing ourselves to bounce and ping pong to all different things and say, no, what am I doing right now? I don't need to take in all this other information. I need to take a moment to be in the now. What's the now about? Why is it important for me to be wherever it is I am?
Yeah, I think it's important. Yes, I mean, I think that's why I've talked to you about like, okay, maybe we just need to whiteboard our house and figure out total schedule, And I don't think we have to get obsessive about things, but I think we have to realize, just like all these things have changed, I think our needs have changed on what we need to do with time. So there's spaces where, yeah, we may not have needed to, sit down and have a conversation about X, Y, and Z previously, but now we do because it's so mixed up in everything that's gone on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like getting really clear on that, not necessarily, over crazy about it, but I guess the main point is to be able to embrace somehow that time isn't speeding up, and we're speeding past our lives if we don't figure out how to manage it on
Right.
some way. So how do we reclaim that? How do we reclaim that meaning? That connection, whatever word.
And I think, how do we reclaim enough of ourselves to reclaim our relationships? Because I think, the place where I'm feeling all of this takes me out of the ability to be present in the relationship or the relationships that I'm in.
That makes total sense.
And then, so then whatever effort it requires to do that, we tend to expend in places that somehow feels like we're supposed to. And so some relationships may do well while others don't do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're tired and worn out at that point, or we're over it.
Right. And Shay says, I think it's a decision. It's a decision, and then it's intentional and affirmational. I think so too, on some level.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, a really good way of stating it.
Yeah. And I would ask, so in some ways, that feels different than in the past. I mean, even pre-COVID, right? On some level, there was more delineation in things. Not that we didn't have cell phones and all those things and internet, but like, yeah, I think I don't think we've ever looked at it quite that way, even if it's always been true. Like, and so how do we, adjust to that?
Interestingly enough, when we watched a video about some of this stuff, and they were talking about COVID, mentioned COVID, and how that had just obliterated all the lines because, of course, you were home and food came, and everything was kind of just blended together. You were working from your desk, you were whatever. And interestingly enough, my experience of COVID was actually that it felt like things slowed down.
Me too.
It felt like things slowed down. It felt like I had more space. And partly, I was working outside of the home, but I wasn't doing anything with people because, it was just a weird situation. But I went to work every day, did the thing, and basically did it by myself. And I had time to just think and relax and read and, watch a movie and rejuvenate, if you will, to come back into the house or to stop at, and wait outside in the line around the Costco parking lot to be able to get in and, get a couple things for the house. And so that was very different. And so I kind of experienced a slowdown. And we also experienced in our family life that, we sat down, we played games, we went on bike rides.
Mm-hmm.
We did, there was a way in which we actually had more things where like, okay, we're not going to work right now. We're going to go and do this. And in part because you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, even work, there couldn't be an emergency that would call you in because most people's work, there was nowhere to go.
Right.
At least a lot of people. And, the kids weren't going to have a special event at school because you weren't going to go to the school for an event. The most that might happen is you would have something to do on your Zoom for an hour somewhere. So anyway, it's interesting to think about all these different aspects of time and how different experiences affect us differently. And while at the same time, they all affect our brains and how we're doing things. And I think, a good part of it is we have to be more intentional about creating the space in our lives, creating the delineations. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy to do, particularly if you don't even realize what's happening. And I think that's part of why I wanted to talk about it, because I think, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought of those things even to go, maybe I need to make some changes over here.
Well, and I think that's the other thing is that as Shay said, it's really making conscious choices.
Right.
And conscious choices means, oh, I haven't seen so-and-so and so-and-so for so long. Let me call, let me make something happen. It means creating, it means being conscious and taking initiative a lot of times. And that becomes another to do, and that becomes, what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of a cycle. So it's somehow finding that balance.
But that kind of goes back to your, create a schedule kind of idea where, in some ways, even the things we do for quote work, and for that we could schedule in a way that we know we have, this time is when I do connections with people, and this time is when I figure out money, and this time is when I, whatever the pieces are of our stuff, and then when that information comes in that I need to deal with such and such, I write it on the calendar or whatever in that time frame, so that when I get to that time, I can do it, and I don't take myself off whatever I'm doing now and go sideways. So I can keep the time rolling forward in a way on whatever I'm working on to stay present to it.
Well, and actually, I learned, that concept that I'm thinking, I learned from you. And I give you credit for that, for the thought of having a plan from which to diverge,
Right.
And being able to move things around, and so I think it's brilliant. So are you saying, I would like to get this on tape, please. Are you saying that you're willing to do that?
Well, what we said is
Yeah. There, you can't pretend you don't have good reception. I'm sitting next to you. But are you saying you're willing to do that? Because I think it's really beneficial, and I think, well, let me give you space.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you willing?
I'm willing to be willing.
Oh, that metaphysical out.
Metaphysical BS.
All
belief
right.
system.
Well, anyway, I want to thank, we're actually at the end of time, and I want to thank Shay today because she's been quite enlightening with reminding us that it's a decision and that it's intentional and affirmational and all of that good stuff. And the wonderful quote in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. And that's the point. We don't want to be moving that fast. We don't want to be moving that fast that we miss it. We want to be in the motion and the range where we're creating it, and it's fantastic. So that's our charge to you. Thank you for joining us on Rockin the Love. And again, just remember that time's not speeding up. We're just moving fast. So take every moment and have it be that breath and that presence and that awareness, and just slow down and make it richer. And
take a break from your scrolling and your picking around. Don't subject yourself to some of those things on a regular basis. Give yourself some space.
Right. All right, everybody. You deserve moments that matter and time that expands instead of disappearing. So go out and embrace time and rock the love, because it'll make the time so much better. And we'll see you next week.
Rock on.
Bye.